The story begins. It was a late summer evening, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple as the sun began its descent. Alex, a young National Service member, was stationed at a remote research center. The center, surrounded by expansive fields, was off-limits to the general public, a realm of secretive experiments and scientific advancement. Security guards manned the gates, ensuring no unauthorized entry. Alex shared the living quarters with a couple of fellow recruits and a research assistant. As the clock struck 5, the center emptied, leaving only the 4 of them amidst the sprawling grounds. Upon arrival, they were warned repeatedly by the staff about the potential dangers lurking in the fields at dusk. The summer months brought venomous snakes like copperheads and cobras, a threat not to be taken lightly. Despite the warnings, Alex and his companions often went jogging in the evenings, finding solace in the vast emptiness of the center. The wide concrete paths between fields offered a sense of freedom and tranquility. Alex relished the solitude, feeling as though he was the only person left in the world. He convinced himself to stay close to the dorms and greenhouses, avoiding the deeper fields. One evening, as June waned into July, Alex's fellow recruit and the research assistant decided to visit the nearby night market. Alex and another recruit, feeling lazy, opted to stay behind and jog before dinner. They changed into their running clothes and set off towards the fields, the evening air cool against their skin. After a few minutes of running together, they naturally split at a crossroad, each taking a different path. Alex continued straight, his feet pounding rhythmically against the concrete. As he passed the fields, he suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of a bicycle approaching from behind. The noise was unsettlingly close, as if someone was right on his heels. Turning around, he expected to see the security guard on patrol, but the path behind him was empty. A chill ran down his spine, but he dismissed it as a trick of the wind or the distant hum of machinery. Yet the sound persisted, a phantom cyclist shadowing his every step. Moments later, his recruit companion caught up to him, asking breathlessly if Alex had heard the bicycle too. They exchanged uneasy glances, both unnerved by the invisible presence. As they ran, the sound of the bicycle grew louder, impossibly close. They fell silent, straining to hear, their hearts pounding in their chests. The recruit suggested they turn around to see if someone was following them. Alex hesitated, fear clawing at his gut, but agreed to the plan. On the count of 3, they both turned, but Alex feigned ignorance, not daring to look. His companion, however, did turn back, his face draining of color. Alex teased him, trying to lighten the mood, but the recruit remained silent, his eyes wide with fear. Anxiety gnawed at Alex, the silence between them heavy with unspoken dread. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw a figure dart across the path ahead. It was the recruit, unmistakably wearing the same clothes. Confusion gripped Alex. If his companion was ahead, who had been running beside him? The realization was chilling, and he felt the icy grip of fear tighten around his heart. The bicycle sound persisted, but now the figure that had been beside him was running parallel in the fields. It wore the recruit's clothes, but its face was unfamiliar, a grotesque parody of a grin twisting its features. Alex's blood ran cold, the realization that this was no human companion sinking in. His mind raced, and he called out to the recruit ahead, desperate to reach safety. The recruit, hearing Alex's cries, picked up speed, seemingly oblivious to the terror pursuing them. Alex pushed himself harder, adrenaline surging through his veins as he closed the distance. The entity in the field, with its unnaturally exaggerated movements, kept pace, its eyes never leaving Alex. When Alex finally reached his companion, he hooked an arm around his neck, pulling him to a halt. Breathless and terrified, they exchanged hurried explanations. The recruit recounted how Alex had urged him to turn around, a chilling echo of Alex's own experience. They realized something malevolent was mimicking them, trying to lure them into a trap. With the entity no longer in sight, they resumed their flight, eager to reach the safety of the dorms. As they neared the building, they spotted a figure on a bicycle across the fields, moving at an unsettlingly synchronized pace. It wasn't the security guard. His bicycle was parked by the dorms. Panic flared anew, and they sprinted the last few meters, bursting through the doors and locking them behind. Outside, the entity stood at the edge of the field, its gaze fixed on the dorms. When the security guard approached, Alex and the recruit breathlessly recounted their ordeal. The guard, surprisingly calm, advised them to stay indoors and lock the doors at night. He revealed that the entity often mimicked voices and chased people, but never left the fields. Despite the guard's reassurances, Alex and his companion remained uneasy, haunted by the night's events. Later that night, as the recruit headed to the kitchen, he caught sight of the entity outside the glass doors. Its hands were pressed against the glass, as if peering inside, its presence a chilling reminder that it could come closer than they'd thought. The recruit froze, a scream caught in his throat as he backed away slowly. The entity, however, remained at the threshold, its eyes unblinking, its grin forever etched in the recruit's nightmares. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. 15 years ago, my dad ventured into the dense woods of Xiluan Mountain. He was accompanied by an unexpected guest, a tiny stray puppy, barely a month old. As he climbed higher, he encountered an enigmatic figure living in the forested solitude. This stranger, the puppy's owner, remarked on the canine's fondness for my dad. "Why not take it home?" he suggested with a mysterious smile. Thus, the little pup became part of our family. We initially named him Xiluan, but it soon sounded eerily similar to the Taiwanese word for heartbreak. So, we affectionately renamed him Xiaohuang. In my primary school years, from grades 3 to 6, our family often embarked on mountain hikes, Xiaohuang included. The trails we chose were steep and challenging, the thin air sometimes leaving me breathless. I would invariably lag behind, but Xiaohuang, with boundless energy, would dart ahead and then back again. It was as if he was checking to make sure I hadn't fallen too far behind. On one such hike, we decided to summit Junta Mountain, spending the night in a quaint cabin nestled amidst the trees. The cabin bore a legacy, once a resting place for workers who strung electric lines across the rugged terrain. We washed in the crisp mountain spring, savoring a simple dinner of hot pot with canned beef and my childhood favorite, mama noodles. The mountain air, fresh and invigorating, was soon thick with the aroma of our meal, a rustic feast I would never forget. After dinner, fatigue set in, and I watched the adults play cards until I drifted into slumber. Sometime in the night, a piercing bird call jolted me awake, its sound foreign and unsettling. The room was oppressively dark, the moonlight unable to pierce the heavy wooden walls. Only a sliver of light crept under the door, flickering like a faint heartbeat. I strained my eyes in the blackness, trying to discern who lay beside me. The silhouette was unrecognizable, merely a breathing shadow. I hesitated to disturb them, unsure if it was one of my dad's friends who shared the room. Fear gnawed at me as I tried to map out the room's layout. the unfamiliarity stoking my anxiety. Sitting up, I scanned the room, forcing my eyes to adjust to the darkness. My father's figure was discernible in the corner, his rhythmic snores offering a modicum of comfort. But the doorway drew my attention, a focal point I couldn't ignore. I began counting the room's occupants, trying to distract myself. Yet the sight beyond the doorframe arrested my attention. 4 figures stood there, 2 adults and 2 children, their outlines trembling with an otherworldly motion. I turned away, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, but the rustling sound of limbs thrashing grew louder. Panic clawed at my throat, the cacophony of movement echoing in the silence. Xiaohuang's barking shattered the tension, his bark relentless and urgent. The room's light flickered on, and I sprang to my feet, heart pounding. The figures were gone, the room's mundane reality reasserting itself. Outside, I found solace beside Xiaohuang, his presence a calming anchor. Never before had I been so grateful for his protective bark. My father awoke to my tale of the shadowy intruders, but his response was dismissive. "Nonsense," he chuckled, urging me back to sleep. Yet, sleep brought no respite, my dreams haunted by the specters. In the dream, they stood at the cabin's threshold, faces sewn shut, a macabre tableau. I awoke in a cold sweat, shaking off the nightmare's hold. Morning arrived, and we resumed our ascent, the night's terror a silent companion. As we trekked, a rustle in the underbrush caught my attention, revealing a coiled serpent. Its form was unfamiliar, the snake rising to face me, mouth open in a silent hiss. Mesmerized, I called out, "A snake!" But my cry went unanswered, my family's presence vanished. I spun around, confusion mounting as the path lay deserted. Panic set in, and I ran, hoping to catch up to them, but the trail remained empty. I returned to the spot where the snake had been, waiting for someone to find me. After what felt like an eternity, footsteps approached, and 4 hikers emerged, a family like specters from a dream. Relief washed over me until they veered off the path into the forest. "Follow us," the father commanded, his voice devoid of warmth. I followed, the path twisting through dense foliage, their movements unnaturally fluid. The mother's sharp sighs and the children's eerie murmurs filled the air, a dissonant chorus. Something was terribly wrong. Their steps were too light, too rehearsed. The father's shoulders were unnaturally high, a bizarre posture he maintained without pause. Fear gripped me as I trailed behind them, my heart a drum in my chest. I called out, "Excuse me, can you take me back to the path?" They halted but did not turn, their silence chilling. The mother's disapproving clicks echoed, the father's shoulders jerking higher. Then, abruptly, they resumed their march, leaving me torn between terror and isolation. A rustle behind me, and Xiaohuang appeared, a beacon of safety. His bark shattered the spell, and I followed him away, the spectral family fading into the trees. We emerged back onto the familiar trail, just as my family returned, oblivious to my harrowing encounter. "Thought you were ahead," my dad's friend remarked, his tone light. I recounted my experience, the snake, the strangers, but they dismissed it as child's imagination. "You weren't bitten, were you?" my mom asked, her concern practical. My dad's response was a teasing, "Just pee on it if you were." As we descended the mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching us. On the drive home, my dad mentioned the registration at the mountain's base. That week, it seemed, only our family had ventured up the trail. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Who were the people I saw if not fellow hikers? The question lingered, unanswered, as the mountain receded into the distance. The memory of that night and the strange family haunted me for years to come. Perhaps some mysteries are best left unsolved, whispers of the unknown that brush against our lives. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. In the secluded town of S City, nestled deep within A County, there existed a chilling legend known to its inhabitants as the tale of the bird-like deity. As a child, I found myself uprooted from my familiar surroundings and brought to this remote place by my mother, following a financial debacle that ensnared my father. I spent a year and a half attending the local middle school, a stark contrast to the life I had known. S City was a place I could hardly believe my father would find a bride, given its distance from modernity. Yet, it was here that I first heard whispers of the bird-like deity. During the summer of my first year, classmates Kurata, Matsuo, and Maeda extended an intriguing invitation to witness this enigmatic figure. Eager to make friends, I accepted their offer without hesitation. Under the dying light of dusk, we ventured to a forgotten part of the hinterlands. An ancient torii gate, worn by time, stood sentinel among the weeds, its atypical red hue casting an eerie glow under the setting sun. "This is merely the entrance," Kurata informed us as we passed through. We continued deeper into the mountains, a silence hanging in the air that was almost tangible. Within minutes, we arrived at a diminutive shrine, barely larger than a kneeled girl with arms wrapped around herself. Inside was a curious offering, a wooden birdcage. "We're here," Matsuo declared, instructing Maeda to retrieve the bread crusts from her bag. "What's this?" I inquired, my curiosity piqued. "Hush, this is the home of the bird-like deity," Kurata explained. "Is it a god?" I pressed on. "I'll tell you more later. Maeda, offer the sacrifice and the bread," Matsuo directed. Maeda complied, unveiling a small bundle of hair wrapped in paper, her own locks noticeably shorter. Matsuo placed the bread crusts before the shrine, lighting the paper and hair with a lighter, muttering a ritualistic chant. "O bird-like deity, we bring a new friend today, Ejima-kun, who has recently arrived in S City. Please watch over him." We stood in silence, a chorus of birds beginning to sing as if in response to an unseen command. "The bird-like deity welcomes you," Matsuo announced. "What exactly is the bird-like deity?" I asked again. "Not what, but who," Kurata corrected. "The bird-like deity is an all-knowing entity here in S City. For the right price, it can answer any question." I pondered the implications of such an exchange. "And if the offering is inadequate?" I queried, sensing the potential peril. "That has never happened." "We're always careful with our questions," Maeda assured me. "But not every question has an answer," I insisted. "That's your perception," Matsuo replied with a smug grin that I found unsettling. He was confident, almost arrogantly so. "Let's begin, Maeda. You first," Matsuo instructed. Maeda tore a page from her notebook, dividing it into 4 pieces to distribute among us. She then retreated to a corner, scribbling something before burning the paper. As she did, the air filled with the simultaneous singing of birds in a 30-meter radius. The sound was both beautiful and terrifying, an auditory omen under the summer dusk. Maeda laughed with a joy that was almost manic, as if she had achieved her life's greatest wish. I began to understand the nature of the bird-like deity. It was a god unique to S City, a deity that could be consulted for a price. The offering Maeda had made, her hair, was proof enough. After writing a question on paper, burning it would elicit a response from the birds. Singing signified a positive answer or approval. Next was Karada's turn. She followed the same ritual, burning her paper. The birds' singing resumed, and Karada beamed with satisfaction. Then it was my turn. Though I believed in spirits, I hesitated, unsure of what to ask. Leaving would be disrespectful to the deity, and I couldn't feign skepticism. Staring at the blank page, I was at a loss. Matsuo encouraged me. Ask anything, preferably a yes or no question, and remember to include the future price. Still, I had no idea. Finally, I decided to write, "Bird-like deity, pardon my intrusion and guide me in the future." I added, "Please spare me, and I will offer many loaves of bread in return." As I burned the paper, I waited with bated breath. After a minute, the birds began to sing, and I exhaled in relief. "You're lucky," Matsuo chuckled. I passed the lighter back to him, watching as he performed the same ritual. The moment his paper ignited, the last rays of sunset vanished and a chill wind swept through. Matsuo whispered his wish. Suddenly, the birds began to call, a stark contrast to their previous song. I recognized the sound as a warning cry, signaling danger. Matsuo's face turned ashen. Why? I offered so much this time. Maeda and Karada sensed the shift, turning to me in panic. "What did you ask? What price did you promise?" Maeda demanded. "You said not to tell," I replied. "That was a lie. Tell us," Karada insisted. "No, you first," I shot back. They hesitated, unable to answer. "Tell me, Ejima," Matsuo shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. The birds' calls continued, an unrelenting cacophony. "I won't. I'm leaving," I declared, grabbing my bag and fleeing down the mountain, but the path was treacherous, and I fell hard before the torii. My right arm dislocated, and a massive splinter pierced my left ankle, leaving me wailing in agony. When I finally returned home, my mother's horror prompted an immediate trip to the city hospital. I cursed my misfortune, questioning why the deity hadn't spared me as promised. After receiving 11 stitches and having my arm set, I spent the weekend recuperating. On Monday, I hobbled to school on crutches. Maeda and Karada approached, feigning concern as if nothing had happened. Yet Matsuo was absent, his desk empty. Our teacher informed us he had taken leave. By Friday, a week after our encounter with the deity, Matsuo was still missing. That evening, we learned from his uncle that Matsuo had succumbed to a high fever the previous night. News spread that his mother had died in a car accident en route to the hospital, her neck broken. Unable to cope, Matsuo's father took his own life. Meanwhile, Maeda started dating a popular senior, and Karada won a family trip to Hawaii. Understanding dawned upon me. That evening, I returned to the torii, leaning on my crutches. I placed a loaf of white bread as an offering, unwrapping it carefully. For 3 months, I continued this ritual weekly. Finally, as the autumn equinox approached, my foot healed completely. As I laid down the bread, the birds began to sing once more. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. At 19, I found myself working part-time at a convenience store in Yonghe, Taiwan. The manager was a woman, a friend I already knew. I asked her if there were any vacancies because she was the manager, and that's how I started working there. To give some background, convenience stores are generally divided into directly operated stores and franchise stores. Franchise stores are independently managed by the franchise owner, who signs a contract with the head office, while directly operated stores are managed by a company-assigned manager. Our store was originally a franchise, but for some reason the franchise owner withdrew and the head office took over, turning it into a directly operated store. My friend, the manager, hereafter referred to as the manager, was assigned by the district head to manage the store. The manager and I worked the morning shift, so we always took over from the night shift. We'd often chat with the night shift before they clocked out, and we began our day. One day, I overslept and rushed to the store, expecting a scolding from the manager. But when I arrived, I noticed the night shift was still there, talking to the manager in the back room. Instead of being angry, the manager looked at me with a worried expression and said, "Something happened." "What happened?" I asked. The manager turned to the night shift worker. "Tell him what you told me." The night shift worker said, "Something strange is going on in the store. Around 2 a.m., a loaf of bread suddenly fell from the shelf. I put it back, but it fell again." "Did the surveillance camera catch it?" I asked. The manager replied, "No, the shelf is just out of the camera's view." I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was just a poorly placed loaf that fell. The incident was soon forgotten. About a week later, during another shift change, the night shift worker mentioned another strange occurrence, and this time it was caught on camera. "What time?" the manager and I asked eagerly. "It was around 2:10 a.m. It happened around the same time as last time," the night shift worker recalled. We quickly pulled up the surveillance footage to around the time mentioned. This time, the cameras caught a bag of chips being pushed off the shelf. It didn't fall straight down as if it were overstocked and slipped. Instead, it flew forward a bit, as if someone had brushed it aside. The bag lay on the floor until morning, when the night shift worker finally dared to pick it up. I was quite laid back, often taking breaks in the back room. Our store was located in a residential area, so it was mostly busy during school and work hours. When there were no customers, I'd sneak into the back room to take a break, leaving the door slightly ajar for a quick return to the counter. One day, when the manager was off, I was alone in the store. In the afternoon, as I sat slacking off in the back room, my phone in hand, I heard a packet of chips fall behind me. I turned to see a bag on the floor. Without much thought, I picked it up to return it to the stock shelf. To keep track of inventory, we usually place chips in a single row, filling the shelf from back to front. As I found the spot for the fallen bag, I froze. There was only one bag left on the shelf, including the one in my hand. The shelf could hold 8 to 10 bags, so it couldn't have just fallen on its own. I quickly placed the bag back and returned to the counter, feeling it was a warning for my laziness. Hours later, when students and parents filled the store, I was stuck at the counter for about 40 minutes, continuously ringing up sales. While I was busy, something caught my eye. The backroom door, parallel to the counter, suddenly opened slowly, stopping at a width that could allow a person to pass. Then it slowly closed again. I glanced at the crowd in the store, my mind racing. Until that moment, I had been skeptical of the incidents. But this left me with a genuine sense of fear. On another quiet day, with no customers in sight, I dared not go to the back room. Even if I wanted to slack, I did so crouched behind the counter. Suddenly, I heard the sound of rustling chip bags, just once, as if someone was picking through them. I stood up to look, but the store was empty. Then, in the security mirror used to deter shoplifters, I saw a figure walking past. Not darting, but walking. I quickly turned to the end of the aisle, but no one was there. While my mind was blank, I heard a woman's voice from the back room say, "Are you looking for me?" I cursed under my breath, took off my uniform, and stepped outside for a smoke. I lost track of how many cigarettes I smoked before a customer prompted me to return and put my uniform back on. I recounted the events to the manager, who then shared her own unsettling experience. Once, while she was restocking the freezer, she found herself locked inside. Despite the freezer having an emergency release, she couldn't open the door. She heard a woman's voice outside but couldn't make out the words. After a struggle, the door opened, but there was no one outside, and she hadn't heard the store's automatic door chime. We reported these incidents to the district supervisor, who visited a nearby temple and consulted the local neighborhood head. We learned that years ago, before it became a convenience store, the building was a residence where the owner had hanged herself. The spot she chose was now where the freezer stood. Towards the end of my time at the store, perhaps protected by the temple's blessings, nothing significant happened. However, one incident reignited my fear. The manager and I were closing up, and I was in charge of clearing the register and depositing the money in the safe. We usually only use the outer register, but that day, for some reason, I used the less frequented inner register. As I lifted the coin tray, I discovered a cardboard partition underneath. Curious, I removed it and felt a chill run from my feet to my head. Beneath the partition were hundreds of talismans, some looking ominous, others normal. There were also clumps of hair and a bag of clipped nails. I immediately called the manager over, and she burst into tears upon seeing it. We hastily replaced the partition, pretending we hadn't seen anything. Not long after this discovery, I was fired, but that's another story. The manager left shortly after I did. To this day, we occasionally reminisce about our time at the store, still unsure why the previous franchise owner abandoned it. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. 4 years ago, I attended a horror film festival abroad. After one of the screenings, I had dinner with a British director named Paolo. We talked about our favorite films, creative processes, and sources of inspiration. Surprisingly, we discovered that both of us had encountered paranormal events. We began exchanging ghost stories, and I cautiously shared some incidents from my student days. Paolo, however, recounted a story that changed her life. It was in 2007, right after she graduated from university. She and 3 classmates drove from London to Wales for a 3-day, 2-night adventure. The incident occurred on the second day. That afternoon, the group was driving through desolate roads. Occasionally, they passed small lakes, but mostly the landscape was just grass and trees. Distant hills were shrouded in mist, barely visible. The sky remained a gloomy gray all afternoon. There wasn't a soul in sight, nor any other vehicles on the road. But this didn't bother them as they reveled in their rock music. It wasn't until dusk that they noticed something peculiar by the roadside. "Hey, did you guys see that?" Ben, who was driving, slowed down and pointed ahead. They all noticed a black church looming by the road. It was a massive structure, blending religious and artistic elements. A black church standing alone in such a desolate place was indeed strange. Doris and Paolo quickly checked their maps and travel guides, but there was no mention of a church on that stretch of road. Still, in rural Wales, such oddities might not be so unusual. The mysterious black church, with its inviting warm orange glow from the windows, piqued their curiosity. They parked in front of the church, excitedly grabbing their backpacks and cameras. "Hello, is anyone there?" Paolo knocked on the heavy door. After several tries, there was no response. "Push it open. Maybe we can just go in," Collins joked. Doris agreed. "It'd be weird not to go in now that we're here." "Let's just say we're tourists," Ben suggested. "Fine. We're not doing anything wrong," Paolo shrugged, slowly pushing open the church door. Inside, they found a grand chapel with high ceilings and ornate decorations. The central aisle led to a carved stone altar. Rows of wooden seats lined the sides, and the floor was a mosaic of black and white stones forming crosses. Numerous candles lit the room, creating a warm and bright atmosphere. Yet underneath the serene ambiance, the flickering lights felt slightly eerie. The silence was unsettling, as if time and breath were trapped within those walls. It felt unreal, and besides the four of them, the place was deserted. For such a secluded location, a large chapel seemed unnecessary. The style appeared ancient, yet the items seemed new. Who lit all those candles? It was as if a crowd had just vanished. The beauty of the chapel soon distracted Paolo. They all took out their cameras, snapping away at objects, each other, and themselves. Collins was the only one using a film camera, cautiously pressing the shutter. A strong wind and rain began battering the windows. "Ha, good thing we came inside," Paolo thought. They chatted and snacked, waiting for the rain to subside. But then, things started to feel off. The wind changed, sounding like wailing cries around the church. Not just one person, but a multitude lamenting around them. Despite their fear, they nervously joked about it. Soon, the noise against the windows changed too. It was no longer the random patter of rain or wind. Instead, it was a rapid, rhythmic pounding on every window. Thud, thud, thud. Fear gripped them, for no storm could cause such sounds. It was like something was trying to break in. Even the highest windows were being hit. With no cell signal, they huddled together, watching the darkened windows. Only their terrified reflections stared back, amplifying their fear. In desperation, they decided to dash back to the car. But once outside, they were stunned. The storm had vanished, and everything was eerily calm. Not even a hint of fog remained. They didn't speak, letting Ben speed away from the sinister black church. At the nearest town, they struggled to comprehend what they had experienced. No one knew of the black church, leaving it an unsolved mystery. They stayed an extra day in town, hoping to continue their trip. But fear overshadowed any desire for adventure. On their way back, they decided to retrace their steps. But the black church had vanished. Where the church once stood, there was nothing. Just wild grass, a discarded snack bag, and tire marks in the mud. Paolo didn't know if the church's disappearance was good or bad. They returned to London in silence, haunted by unanswered questions. All their photos were just blackness, except for one exception. Collins had used a film camera. A month later, he contacted them. He looked gaunt and haunted, unlike himself. Collins showed them the photos he developed. Paolo shivered as she recounted this part. The chapel was filled with robed figures. They surrounded Paolo and her friends. The ceiling, thought to be decorated, was lined with hanging bodies. Every cross in the church had vanished. The photos shook them to their core. They vomited in fear and shock. After heated discussion, they decided to destroy the photos. Paolo, however, took some pictures of the photos as evidence. Strangely, her phone retained these images. Ben took the originals, planning to consult a priest. That was the last they saw of Ben. He disappeared along with the photos and negatives. Even after police involvement, Ben was never found. Over time, guilt mingled with fear as the group struggled to move on. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. In a quiet neighborhood of a city in the West, an unassuming clinic stood, its brick facade blending seamlessly with the surrounding buildings. Emma had been an assistant there for nearly 7 years, ever since she started college. There was a basement in the clinic intended for doctors and assistants to rest. Its exterior was ordinary, offering no hints of the events that would soon unfold. A few years back, just before leaving, a doctor had remarked, "There's something wrong with the basement." But without evidence or further incidents, the staff dismissed the warning. 1 month, the owner of the clinic left for an overseas trip, leaving the remaining doctors' schedules scattered. Despite the reduced activity, the assistants were required to be present. Emma and her colleagues decided to take shifts to manage their hours. One of her co-workers, let's call her Mary, was as seasoned as Emma and often chose to relax. With no one around, Mary half-closed the clinic's metal shutter and went to the basement to watch TV. As evening approached, she heard a knock on the metal door upstairs. Racing up to answer, she found no one there. Shrugging it off as a prank, Mary returned to the basement. On her way down, she noticed an eerie silence and questioned whether she'd turned off the TV. Trying to shake off the unsettling feeling, she lay back on the sofa, reaching for the remote. Suddenly, the lights went out with a sharp click. Terror-stricken, she scrambled back upstairs and dashed into a nearby convenience store. Knowing Emma had a sensitivity to the supernatural, Mary called her in a panic. Emma and her boyfriend Jack rushed over to console her. Mary insisted it wasn't a coincidence that the lights had turned off. Emma and Jack tried to reassure her, attributing it to a faulty switch. Reluctantly, they escorted Mary home, then returned to the clinic to close up. While Emma tidied the reception, Jack glanced down the basement stairs. There, at the bottom, lay a dead rat, its stench overwhelming. The oppressive darkness of the unlit basement was suffocating. Emma squealed, disposing of the rat, and called Mary. Mary claimed she hadn't seen any rat earlier. Weeks passed, and the clinic continued to experience odd occurrences. Emma avoided the basement, preferring the safety of the reception. One evening, as she counted money to deposit in the safe, the lights flickered off again. Startled, she dropped the cash, scrambling to turn the lights back on. As she bent down to retrieve the bills, she found them neatly stacked inside the safe. Fearful and confused, Emma fled next door. Despite the bizarre incidents, the clinic remained a relatively calm workplace. The owner returned and decided to revamp the clinic, bringing in new, younger doctors. One evening, Jack decided to visit Emma at work. He brought dinner and joined one of the doctors, Dr. Allen, in the basement. Their conversation shifted from sports to the supernatural at Dr. Allen's behest. Allen confided that he often felt drained in the basement, sometimes even falling asleep during shifts. He recounted an incident where he awoke to a chilling presence. Dr. Allen described hearing a strange noise, a sound neither footsteps nor laughter. From the shadows emerged a dark figure, moving in an unsettling dance. Its face was grotesquely clear, with exaggerated features and a twisted smile. But its eyes were the most disturbing, resembling a warped symbol. As the apparition drew closer, Dr. Allen found himself paralyzed. Just as it was nearly upon him, Mary appeared, shaking him awake. She was unaware of the entity, dismissing his questions. Dr. Allen decided to confide in Jack, revealing his family's temple in the south. The advice from his father was simple: keep a protective charm close. Jack, concerned, suggested Emma and Mary avoid the basement. Days later, Dr. Allen abruptly resigned, citing a transfer closer to home. His departure seemed routine, yet Jack couldn't help but link it to the ominous figure. Emma and her colleagues were unfazed, continuing their work. Meanwhile, Emma's sister had left a high-tech pet camera with them. One night, unable to sleep, Jack decided to check the camera feed. The clinic's examination room appeared on his screen, dimly lit by an emergency exit sign. As he watched, a shadow flickered across the green glow. a dark figure emerged, moving deliberately across the room. It paused, then turned to face the camera. Jack's heart raced as he struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. The figure stood still, its presence ominous. Unable to resist, Jack zoomed in, only for the figure to lock eyes with the camera. Horrified, he fumbled with his phone, nearly dropping it. The creature's gaze seemed to pierce through the screen. As he hesitated, more shadows began to move in the background. Jack quickly turned off the device, his heart pounding. Beside him, the family dog whimpered, pressing against his leg. A wave of dread washed over him. Had he attracted their attention? The following morning, Jack urged Emma to take a day off. Obligations prevented her from skipping work, but Jack insisted on visiting the clinic. He shared his experience with the staff, their reactions mixed with fear and disbelief. Some employees had also experienced unexplainable events. The clinic's owner, overhearing the discussion, seemed troubled. After a lengthy phone call, he wrapped an object in newspaper and apologized profusely. He handed out small red envelopes to the staff, urging them to visit a shrine for peace. Emma and Mary speculated about the mysterious object the owner had taken from the basement. Mary recalled seeing a statue in the corner, while Emma mentioned a vase in the changing room. Regardless of the object's significance, they hoped it would bring calm. The owner granted them an unexpected break, citing personal matters. The unsettling events left a lasting impression, blending fear with curiosity. Emma and Mary decided to visit a local temple, seeking comfort in its serene atmosphere. As they left, a sense of relief washed over them. In the days that followed, the clinic's unusual incidents seemed to subside. The new doctors settled in, their youthful energy breathing life into the workspace. Yet, the memory of that shadowy figure lingered in the back of Emma's mind. It served as a reminder of the unseen world that occasionally intersected with their own. Despite the unsettling experiences, life at the clinic continued, an unspoken pact of cohabitation with the unknown. Emma found solace in her routines, even if the basement remained a forbidden zone. The clinic, with its ordinary exterior, concealed mysteries that defied explanation. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive. The story begins. I always hoped it was just fatigue, that perhaps yesterday was just an unusual day. But this incident is still fresh in my mind, as I had just completed a Round Island trip yesterday. The journey spanned a total of 131 kilometers, taking 23 hours and 9 minutes. The event occurred on Provincial Highway 3, sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning. Let's first examine the physical records. The dashcam typically records in 5-minute segments, unless space runs out. Apart from the gap where I went home to rest before heading out again, the gap between segments 1574 and 1575 happened while driving, yet there's a 10-minute gap. I had intentionally pressed the emergency recording button, which would copy that segment to the emergency folder. As you can see, something unusual occurred. The road conditions ahead were somewhat like this. A thick fog suddenly appeared, but it felt darker, more like smoke from factory exhaust rather than the usual white mist of water vapor. The fog was so thick that even with the fog lights on, I couldn't see the road ahead. For safety, I decided to stop and wait, unfamiliar with the road and unwilling to drive blindly. Everyone knows that mountain roads have road signs, right? They typically look like this. I waited for the fog to thin a little, and at that moment, the car clock read 3:50. Despite seeing the road, I still dared not drive. The road signs I saw were like this. They had turned red, and the directions seemed all wrong. How could I possibly drive in such conditions? The GPS? It had frozen entirely since the fog began. I was listening to a VOD of a program on YouTube, but the phone rebooted and got stuck on the startup screen. Then, the frozen GPS suddenly spoke, with the same voice as when it was functioning normally. The minimum speed limit on this road is 120 kilometers per hour. Please increase your speed. Let's not even discuss the rationality of a 120 minimum limit. On the winding mountain roads of Highway 3, driving 120 would turn anyone into a banana. So I continued to wait, hoping things would return to normal. In such conditions, it's impossible to force your way through. The car clock showed 3:49, then 3:48, then 3:47. Time was running backward, and I knew this was a terrible sign. I had read similar stories before, where time reversing to a certain point could lead to something terrifying. Then I remembered a chant someone taught me, Lin, Bing, Do, Jie, Zhen, Lie, Qian, Xing. Desperate times called for desperate measures, so I chanted it. Suddenly, the fog thickened again, though not as impenetrable as before. I saw flashing lights in the distance, like those on a police car. A silhouette of a vehicle with flashing police lights seemed to stop beside me. Yes, I said silhouette because I couldn't make out any color on the vehicle's body, just a shadow. After a moment, the police car started moving again and drove straight ahead, gradually disappearing into the distance. Then, the fog dissipated, and everything looked normal again. The frozen devices came back to life, and the phone resumed playing as if nothing had happened. The car clock now read 4:05. There was a 5-minute blank in what I experienced and what the physical records showed. Even more bizarre, the dash cam recordings before and after this period didn't connect seamlessly. It was as if something had forcibly cut out the middle part. In conclusion, I can't explain what happened, but I know I need to visit a temple for some peace of mind. The story ends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Macabre for more twisted tales that keep the darkness alive.